Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. Let me start off by mentioning something here real quick. The other day, recently I've had several people call and complain about two things on a video that just all of a sudden has gone viral, I guess you'd say. I'm getting a huge amount of response on one video in particular for some reason that's been out for several months. So anyway, the complaints are my squeaky chair. Nobody ever noticed. I actually fixed it. So, and that's another story. But also, they kept telling me things like, and I'll give you an example. One example, the guy said, this was on that video in particular, and that video is 16 minutes and 24 seconds long. And he says, the video, a great video, but it took 16 minutes too long. So I guess that means that maybe some don't have the attention span that you might think. So for those of you that really don't want to go through the whole thing of why and how explain to you thoroughly, let's do this real quick. It's the General 721. Buy it. There. All done. Now, those of you that are interested in saying, well, why the hell is that? Let's continue on. So, anyway, that's for you guys out there that just don't have the attention span. This is something that this was the first caliper I ever bought. We're going to talk about these calipers. This is the General 721. It has two scales on it, the 16th of an inch and 32nd of an inch. And you can move it, and this thing actually is extremely accurate. Same as any of the others. Now, I used that one for years and years, and finally I felt kind of guilty, and I thought, I probably should have something that reads better or is more accurate, but it turns out I was kind of wrong about that. So I bought this one, and I bought this used on eBay. This is a real high quality. Ooh, almost dropped it. You don't want to do that with these. But I bought this on eBay at a reasonably good price for such an expensive one. Even though this is a Japanese-made one, it is a high quality, and quite frankly, I would say is pretty comparable to the Starrett. So, and when I got it, I thought, okay, now we'll really style it. So I went to use it, and the first problem I ran across, which is why I found out after 2 days I stopped using it, that was because this thing reads in decimals, thousandths of an inch. It means that I had to, every time I use it, I had to convert it from decimal to fraction. More math. So guess what happened? This thing got put up on my tube wall, and I virtually never touch it. It was a waste, quite honestly. So then I went back to using this one. Then I came along with the harebrained idea that, oh, yeah, that's good for it. I came along the idea of this one, digital. Oh, that reads all three. You can do fractional, you can do decimal, and you can do metric. Yeah, that's what I want. So I bought one of these. Used it for a while. And I realized real quick that, I used a fraction. This is a wood shop. I don't use decimals as a general rule. If I was a machinist, I would. But I just have never been around it, and I prefer fractions for working in woodworking. And most of the time. There are rare occasions, but that's different. So the problem I ran across this is, the reason I bought it is because it said it does fractional. And it does. The problem is, you only see one number on the screen, and it could be 61 1/28. It goes all the way down to 128ths of an inch. And if you have 61 128ths of an inch, you actually have to do a little bit of math to figure out what the hell that is really. How's that in reference to 5/16 or half inch or whatever? You have to do some math to figure out, drill it down, and bring it down to a common denominator. Math. So I decided that was a disappointment. I wish I should not have bought this one. So that was number two. Then I bought this one. And this one I bought relatively recently. And what about this one is that, yes, this is a dial. But this also is fractions. And the big increments on it are 1/16 of an inch increments. In between, there are 3 hash marks, which means that it actually drills down to a 64th of an inch. But the difference is that just like on a regular ruler, this one here, you can actually see exactly where you're at and what number you're close to in measurement. So if I was at 5/8 of an inch plus 1/64th, whatever that would be in 64ths, 21, I don't have to do the math to figure it out, figure out that it's just over 5/8 of an inch. So this is much, much better. I actually can read this. The only thing is, this thing runs at least, I think I paid $60 for this. And that's pretty close to the minimum what you're going to pay for one of these. And this is a no-name brand. And like I said, it works great. It works just like all of them do. They all have the same characteristic. They can measure outside measurements, inside measurements, and depth. And they all do that, including the general. So why buy something else? You can. Don't get me wrong. I'm glad I bought this one. Finally. Only took me 3 tries to find something better than that. But I don't really need this. If I really am in a tight shop and you go, man, I wish I had a caliper out there I could use. Honestly, this is all you have to buy. And guess what? I can still buy this. I paid $6 for this 15, 20 years ago. And it still works just as good as the day I bought it. But this one cost, like I say, it's $60. So that's what makes this. You can still buy it for $9. I'll leave a link in the description where I found it for that. And I think Granger sells this too. It's the General brand. The brand is General, and it's at $7.21. Now, for you guys across the pond or down under or wherever, they use the metric system. Sorry, maybe I'm prejudiced. But anyway, for those of you that use the metric, they actually make this in a 722. And the 722, the only difference is the upper area is 1/16 increments, and the lower area is millimeters. Unless you're from down under, then you have to turn it this way to get it up and down. Never mind, that's Australian humor. So, but this actually is a good little caliper, and it'll do everything that those will do, with one minor exception, and that is if you take a look at this. Most of these calipers, high quality, out on the tip, they bevel it. And that's to make it thinner, so that if you want to use this to get in between the threads and measure the actual shank, the shank size, you can do that with this one. Because that end of this, if you go out here, you're only going to measure to the outside of the threads. But if you go here, you can actually get in between the threads and measure it, so you can see what size drill bit you want to use to get the maximum amount of threads cutting in without having to really dig in, because the shaft doesn't fit in the hole. So the perfect size to drill out of this would be a 3/16 drill bit. That's 1/4 inch, and that's why that works. On this one, it's the same thickness all the way through. So the problem with this is that if I get a bolt that has finer thread than a 16 TPI, this does not fit in between the threads. Also, if you want to measure the outside, this one's a little tricky. You got to actually put it in there at like a 45-degree angle so that it touches the threads all the way across to get an accurate measurement. But if I measure this one, I can get an accurate measure just like any of them. And it says right at 1/4 inch. And I can tell you that's what that one, any of these will say the same thing. But if I try to measure the inside threads, this one only gives me about a 64th difference in size. And that is because it's not seating all the way down to the shaft. So the jaws on this on the end do not have what these have. Now, could I put a little notch in there myself? Probably. But I don't like to revamp things necessarily if I can help it. I've been able to get by with it without any problem. That's the only shortcoming I've seen of this. Well, there is one more thing. This is not as high quality of a metal as these are. And the only drawback to that is you get this patina that is building up on there. You can see it on the back of this one. While on the front, it actually is still pretty clear, and I can read this just as good as the day I bought it, quite honestly. But for the first couple of years, I was having trouble trying to read, and it kept getting worse and worse, and I finally realized that really was just the oil from my hands patining, putting a patina on the surface. So then I got in the habit of once or twice a year, I just get out my good little old-fashioned brass brush, and I can set this down. Let me get, you want to see this, I'm sure it's important, since we're rambling. You're still with me, right? Okay. But you can take this and actually just go through here and give this thing a good brushing for about 3 or 4 minutes. Open it up and do this area down at this end too. And actually, that's how I've kept this clean all this time, and it has not patinaed on the scale. Very simple, very quick to keep it clean with just a little brush. You can do it with a nylon brush. You just have to work at it a little longer. But it doesn't take much. And like I say, once or twice a year, when it starts to get kind of hard to read, then I take it out and my brush out and I do it. Great little caliper. Do you want to spend $60 or $100 or more for one? If you got the money and you want to do it, go for it. But if you're like I was many years ago, pretty tight budget, and I wanted the caliper, so I looked at all the different ones out there and I bought this one to begin with, and it has actually fulfilled the needs that I had for many, and still can. I don't really need any of these others. So it is a good buy, and it is very, very accurate. I'm just as accurate with this as I am with those, with that one exception of threads, which I explained to you. So if you're really on a tight budget, this is the one to go. If you really like the metric though, you can get the 722 instead. I don't know where to get it, but if you do a search on the general 721 or 722, they will all pop up on a search on Google or whatever. So you can find one if you really try. I don't know where they're at, but that's okay. Anyway, that's the whole thing. That's the long version, the long-winded one. I hope you're still with me. If you have any questions, any comments, want to say something about how you use them or why you have, which one you have and why, leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear this stuff. But if you're like me and you want to save a few bucks, this is definitely the answer. So there's the long-winded answer. So, and that other guy that already left, he doesn't know what he missed. He missed the good stuff. So I want to thank you for coming by, truly. If you like this video, you learned something here, hit that like button. Most importantly though, please come back again, because like the sign says, I'm nowhere near done. Thanks. And we'll see you again soon.